Hello, thank you guys for joining us on In the Flow today with Jessica Kay and Robin Wilt. So today we have Lambeth. Lambeth is an amazing reader and healer, and I'm going to read her bio for y'all right now. So she is from North Carolina. She's a mother to two wonderful preteen boys. She loves ecstatic dance and trees and gleaning all the lessons from life that she can possibly get. The first 20 years of her adult life, she worked as a golf teaching pro, a mortgage loan officer, in human resources, and a stay-at-home mom. On the heels of a chronic health crisis and traumatic divorce, this last decade has found her on a healing journey, deepening her spiritual connection, which has led to developing her intuitive and healing gifts. She now helps friends and clients heal their relationship with self and with others through cardology, Akashic records, past lives, and energy readings, as well as performing energy healings. Her greatest wish is that all beings live their truest, most authentic expression of themselves and their life. Thank you. And yes, I can read. It is Mercury retrograde, so we're going to blame it on that. And I'm wondering if you guys are feeling it in the audience, you can drop it in the comment box as well. Let us know how you're doing during this month-long extravaganza of Mercury retrograde. Anyway, welcome, Lambeth. Thank you so much for coming on. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, so I heard that you and Jessica connected yesterday. I met Lambeth first, and then when we were chatting about having her on the show, we always like to kind of highlight people's gifts and what they do. So yeah, y'all share a little bit with us, like what you connected with yesterday, and actually, Lambeth, share a little bit about what you do first.
Okay. I guess I'll start with where it started for me, kind of in the bio, mentioning the chronic health issues and divorce. And I was a single mother. My children had kind of special needs. And so life was really, really, really hard. And a friend said to me, would you like for me to read the cards between you and your ex-husband? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever that is. I was open. And at that point, my only experience with any sort of metaphysical or esoteric tools was astrology and numerology. And so I didn't know what cardology was, but I was open. And so she read them, and I just felt really seen. And I felt like, wow, he is who he is, and I am who I am. And he isn't who he isn't, and I am not who I'm not. And it just really started my journey of giving myself permission to be exactly who I am and who I'm not, and figuring out even what that is, and for others as well. And so it felt like a language that I spoke. I mean, it just felt so right. So I immediately bought all the books, and then I started learning and training with others in the field. So that's how I got introduced to cardology. And that was about 8 years ago. And then about 3 years ago, I started noticing that as I was reading for people, I was receiving information that wasn't necessarily in the book or in the description of the cards, similar to like a tarot reader. So there's the card and what it says, like the energy of the card, but then the tarot reader can improvise and ad lib and kind of pull in the intuition. So I noticed that was happening, and felt really good, and I would really get in flow. And so I wanted to look into that more. And so I started to study more of like energy reading, channeling, kind of getting those intuitive downloads, and learning the clairs, how I receive information psychically or intuitively, which was claircognizance was very clear. So I would know things that would just drop in my head. And that was really cool because it's like I'd always kind of known things, but didn't know how I knew things. And so I was just learning all of this, and it was really helpful to understand. and clairsentience, which is the feeling like in my body. Clairvoyance occasionally. That doesn't happen super often for me. I'm missing one of the main four. Anyway, those are the main ones. So I started developing that over the last few years and incorporating those into my readings. And it's just kind of made everything even more powerful and a lot more transformation that I see in my clients. And yeah, I think that feels like good to share right now.
Yes, Robin.
I'm having technological issues. I hit unmute like 4 times. I was going to say, Lambeth helped me with a connection that I was like trying to understand. You really do have a gift in like helping that connection piece, which is something that I think we can definitely take for granted, how our energy flows with another and how, I believe, I think both of you do as well, that like we come in, with these lessons that we're meant to learn from certain people and these contracts that we have with people. So it's very interesting to see like how that shows up in the energy and how it shows up in the cards. Yeah, I want to hear about what y'all got into. Do you want to share, Jessica, or?
Yeah, I would love to share. It was first, I will say I had my own little personal chuckle because I have been doing some deep dive into human design and gene keys recently. One of the sequences kind of retreat just closed off, and I was sitting like I like to do after any major thing and going through and like what are all the pearls that I've gleaned from all of this information, and we're following the little rabbit holes and getting that all packaged together. So I had come up with like a paragraph of statements that really summarized how I show up in the world when I'm working at my highest frequency, and also my own self-awareness of knowing who I am. And it was interesting because Lambeth says, oh well, you're a 7 of clubs and a jack of clubs, and it means this. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, and she was literally saying things that were almost exactly like what I had written or what I had read and distilled. It was wild because it was just wild how like spot on. Like I could have literally taken my paragraph that I worked a long time on consolidating. I really did. I worked hard. And she was just like bloop, 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 bloop. And I'm like, oh my God, like, yes, like totally seen and validated. And also I was completely blown away by the wisdom contained in Lambeth and this modality. And the fact that it does combine really well with astrology and numerology. And it just like landed in so many ways. And I've had a reading of cardology about a decade ago, and it was done a little bit differently. And the way that she did it, presented it in a way that really was like, hey, this is what's going on. This is some information. And this is also how you can work with this more to do some more self-discovery. So it wasn't just like, oh, here's some awareness, but really the way she expressed it and talked with me about it, it allowed me to see that this could be used for my own self-discovery. And we even talked about it with my husband and how like there's the yin and yang, like there's this opposite that really supports. So it's like, oh yeah, like the way you're describing him is the ways that he supports me moving through the world where I have challenges. Like I'm very spiritually focused. I'm kind of way out there doing day-to-day, very mundane, grounded tasks, like calling the electric company or doing things like that. I can do it because, of course, I've functioned in this world for 40 years, but he is able, willing, perfect to do that. So he just does it. And it's like, it's like this big breath of fresh air where our partnership really supports me and him. Because there's things that I do, there's things that he does, and it kind of melds really well into our strengths. So it was fascinating to get that. I'm like, oh, yeah. And I take those things for granted. So to have her say, oh, what about this? I'm like, oh yeah, like that really is super supportive. And I take it for granted. And it really does meet needs that I don't even want to deal with. So it was very illuminating and I loved it. Like it was amazing.
We had so much fun.
Yeah.
So thank you. That was actually really great to hear. Yeah, what it affirmed and validated for you. And I, like I said, I've been using this system for 8 years, and the amount of times I or my friends or a client have said, "You can't make this shit up," or I don't know, can I cuss on here? You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this shit up. It's amazing, and it happens in other systems too. I mean, there's so much wisdom in these tools that we can use to help us understand ourselves and on our journey. But as Jessica mentioned, her birth card is the 7 of clubs. My birth card is also the 7 of clubs. So we were just like, two peas in a pod. I was like, I see you. And then this system has a birth card, like I mentioned, and it also has a secondary card that is informed by the planet that rules your zodiac sign. So I'm Cancer. Cancer is ruled by the moon. So my birth card is the 7 of clubs, and the moon card to a 7 of clubs is the 9 of hearts. Jessica is, are you Aries? Okay, is Aries. And she's also 7 of clubs based on that birth date. But Aries is ruled by Mars, and the Mars card of the 7 of clubs is the Jack of clubs. So her second card is the Jack of clubs. So we both have a life path card of a 7 of clubs. So there's the energy and the essence and like an overarching theme of the way we experience life would be very similar, but we each express it differently through different cards, through different astrology, different, which would inform like a different personality and kind of how we show up and how people receive us. But the essence and the nitty gritty of the life path is similar. So that's really cool. Robin, I wanted to speak to, you mentioned me reading the connection for you. So a relationship connection, a connection between two people, being able to read like how the energy flows. I just had another reading today with a client who had the same connection. I'm seeing it everywhere since May, I think. I have so many. And for myself included, I've experienced this connection where there's this Venus between two people, and Venus is love and ease and compatibility and can feel, well, does just feel really amazing. And so it's giving, a lot of people are experiencing like, oh my gosh, I've never felt this way before, or why does this feel, is this really real? And it's like, that's Venus. It's really great. I don't need to go further into the details on that, but anyway, it happened again today, and I thought of you and all my other clients. I was like, Venus is in the air.
I mean, don't you think that I feel like a lot of people in our circle, because we've been doing so much work over the last decade, I feel like a lot of people are probably coming into, more partnership or like more possibility for partnership, whereas for a while it just wasn't, I think we had to heal so much that it just wasn't time. That's just kind of what I think. And then also like what I want to share, what's coming to mind is, all of these archetypes, like all of these things that we kind of draw on, whether it's astrology or the cardology or, tarot, it's like these archetypes that we understand. And then we then find the energy within ourselves, right? That Venus energy, like, where does that show up in us? How do we express that externally with other people? Right. Because even as Lambeth shared with her and Jessica, like they have the same birth card, but then they express it differently because they have, different birthdays and, their different sun signs. So it's fascinating to kind of get into like the detail of all of it. And then also like your intuition, right? Like I love that you channel and that you are, are you okay with calling it channeling? I mean, yeah. Insights, intuitive, whatever, downloads, whatever you want to call it. I think that's really when things start to click into place, is when we're able to kind of take those systems and combine it with the information about the archetypes and the system with our intuition, because there are so many different expressions of the energy. Have you found that as well, like that it kind of plays out differently for different people, even through like that same Venus connection that you're sharing about?
Well, because you have, so yeah, there's the archetypal energy of the card, and then you have this Venus with this other person's energy. And so um, it would look different. Well, actually, I mean, Venus is Venus. Venus just feels really, really good. Um, but we all do have our own Venus card in cardology, and we all have our own Venus in astrology. And so we all do love in our own individual ways. But yeah, Venus feels really beautiful. And I guess I will go a little bit more in detail because you kind of hit the nail on the head. So I feel as well like collectively, a lot of us 5 to 7 years ago had this spiritual awakening stuff happening. For me, it was post divorce and, chronic health stuff. And it just kind of like wakes you up. And a lot of times that's a catalyst for people. But we have this kind of spiritual awakening and we're learning about ourselves and we're healing. And then the last couple years, we are now meeting partners that we have, and we've felt this love that we have never felt before. And we're like, oh my gosh, I have never felt so seen. I've never felt so loved. And it's beautiful and pure. And it's easy for us to attach to that person, meaning like, so we have to hang on to this person, or we have to be with them because I've never felt this before and I may never feel it again. That often happens. And what I've learned for myself and what I'm seeing with others is sometimes that is lasting and the relationship actually really does work in real life and it can work long term, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's important to be able to discern, okay, there's this Venus and this is great, and that doesn't mean that it's actually going to work. I feel like the reason why we've never felt this way before or attracted this type of energy before is because we aren't the same version of ourselves that we were before. We have healed. We have come home to ourselves. We have worked to drop into our heart. Like, we emanate more love. And so we're going to attract this love that we've never experienced because we're also able to give the love that we've never been able to give. And so I feel like that's really the main thing. And one of the things that keeps coming through for me collectively is to thank spirit and thank universe for bringing these people together in order for us to be able, or them, all of us, to be able to experience this love that we have never experienced before. And from here, like, there's nothing that we can't feel or do or accomplish. Like, it really gives us this sense of self-worth and validation and love to go forward into whatever is next, however we show up for clients or family or the future loves that come in our lives. And so really honored to like feel that really pure love, and it does feel collective.
Yeah, I really, it's interesting that we're kind of going down this route for sure. Because there is like, I think when we do experience that, like, as you grow and as you heal, you're a different version of yourself, right? So you show up differently. Like, I show up differently in all of my relationships now than I ever did. My heart is much more open. I'm able to express love in a different way. Like, whereas before I would kind of hold back, out of fear of rejection or, whatever. So it's interesting to see like how, all of the growth that you experience, like how that manifests in your life as time kind of goes on. So what have y'all noticed, like personally? Have you anything that you've noticed about like acceptance or?
I would say a lot of this is making me think of North Node and Chiron. So we have been churning in this for a while now, and it's bringing it up for us to heal, and I know that, you mentioned this kind of spiritual awakening, and for me, it's been like deep, deep healing. So yes, the same thing. And like just having the capacity to go into those dark places and shed some light on it. And I feel myself drawn to people with the capacity to grow and to heal. So when we talk about these connections and love and all of that, I know for me, that's what I want. Like, I made a conscious decision, like, if people aren't healing, growing, and evolving, then, that's their choice. And I want to be surrounded by people that are healing, growing, and evolving. And as we kind of spiral up in those frequencies, we're going to bring those frequencies into us. So I would say the astrology is helping us a lot too with these really intense eclipses. We're being We have all the solar flares that are, coming down upon us and helping us upgrade. So I think we're all moving into this higher frequency, and we're either facing those shadows or those shadows are taking us down. And so as we kind of move through that, we're drawn to the people that are also moving through it. I know it's a little bit of a convoluted answer, but I would say for people, because like I've been in a relationship for 5 years, and I can say that for me, the more that I loved myself and nurtured myself and cared for myself, the more I saw that shifts in my relationship. So it is very much of we've done the work and we're attracting people. But even if we're in relationship and we're doing the work, only one person in the relationship has to do the work. It doesn't mean that you stay in relationships you don't belong in. That may be like I'm sitting here doing the work and that relationship ends, because I have experienced that most of my life of, okay, I'm in this relationship for a reason and I chose this for a reason. And I'll do another plug for the gene keys. That's what I love about the Venus sequence. The Venus sequence, Richard Rudd says, start this sequence. It helps you determine where you need healing for yourself around relating to others. And it's like, and make a commitment to your relationship that you're going to stay in it. And I did every single time. I've actually 3 different times done the Venus sequence. And it can take 6 months, it can take a few months, but I can tell you that when I started it and when I ended it, some relationships ended and it wasn't of my own. Like I was just like, I'm going to keep expanding. And they decided to walk away. And I was like, okay, this is a blessing. And then there are times where I was in relationship and I went through that deep work on myself and I saw the other person shift. So I will say all of this to say, we can work on ourselves and everything will shift around us. And it'll either shift away or it'll shift close to us. But ultimately, we are the catalyst for our lives.
Yeah, I'm really feeling that. I think that's such an important reminder that when we are doing the work, that it forces things around us to change. Do you see that too, Lambeth? Like as people choose to kind of step into these dynamics and to be aware of like the energies that they have with somebody, that bringing it to the light and like bringing the awareness to it, that it actually, because right, like that's something in astrology, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like the observation effect, I guess, where like you make it aware and you're like, oh, okay, these are the challenges, these are the strengths, like let me be more intentional with the energy and actually use it to my benefit, our benefit, whatever. Have you kind of also noticed that with cardology and like the relationship work that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's making me think of when I was a newer mom and one of my children had something going on. And I remember trying to figure out what it was and having a couple people reflect, like maybe don't overanalyze or like, try to put them in a box or something. And I remember thinking, like, you can't treat something that's not diagnosed. And so that's what comes up for me. We can't heal something we don't know is harming or hurting us. We can't transform something that we don't know is there necessarily. I mean, the word can't probably isn't super empowering, but the more awareness we can bring to, the way, like our patterns and the way that we work with money or in relationships or health stuff, those are kind of the 3 main things that show up for people that want to like kind of shift their pattern or their energy around those. Once it's named, kind of diagnosed, yes, or like affirmed and validated, it's like, oh, okay, so from there, now what? I feel like that's the kind of starting point. And one thing that I definitely see, there is a big difference in the people that I read, those who are already practiced and already doing a lot of shadow work and bringing light to that and healing and finding their authenticity and learning to express that. They're living a little bit more on what could be said like on path or in their purpose, or they're at least kind of aware that they're not, or what it might be. They're on that journey versus people who aren't yet. When someone is more on path, I'll read the card system, like what's coming up this year or what just happened last year, and it is literally spot on. It's like, that's good. You're on path, whether it's challenging or easy. You're on path. And so the more you can stay on path, the more those energies that are kind of already there to support us can support you. Those who aren't necessarily on path, I guess we would say, are living more purely out of free will or just on autopilot, not aware, making decisions mostly from the mind, not from the heart or the body. And I could say like, oh, it looks like maybe a new job, or I see a relationship or something, and they're like, no, that it doesn't really, it's not in sync. So I think that's sort of an answer to your question, that like once we kind of start on the thing keeps moving and growing and expanding and fulfilling.
Yeah, that's been such a big growth point in my own life the last year, especially, is like that difference between my personal will and what divine will is for me. And it's challenging for sure, because we think, oh, I'm gonna manifest and I'm gonna like create all the things for my life and I want this thing and I'm gonna call it in and this is how it's gonna look. And then life does not happen that way. I feel like that's one of, I feel like there's like different layers of, or different levels, I guess, of our spiritual journey. And I feel like that's the current one that I'm on. And collectively, like we probably tend to go through similar patterns, I would imagine. But yeah, that like my therapist, she does energy work, she does body talk or whatever, and also like talk therapy, but she's been really helping me to like what you were saying about connecting to the heart, but it's like we can't live all from heart either. It's like we have to be able to have those boundaries and like, to be like somewhat logical about our decisions. So it's like connecting, the three brains, the head, the heart, and the gut too. So like really feeling that embodied choice, right? Like, is this in alignment with what spirit desires for my life? And also, what we want to a certain extent. It's like, you don't want to be in a job or a relationship that you hate, even though that might be necessary for a time because of whatever you're meant to be learning. Sometimes that is like when I've tuned into something and I've gotten a yes from spirit, it's like, I don't want to freaking do this. Like, I don't want to do this. And when I pray about it or when I check in, it's like, well, you're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, I might as well just suck it up and do it, and just learn the lesson and move on with life so I can be done with it quicker. That's my motto. I'm like, all right, let me get in there. let me learn it so I can be done with it, like move on.
Yeah, I love that, Robin, because I'm most of the time I am. I've become a little less like jump in the deep end, but very much like, okay, let's get this working. And I will say, I'm going to bring it back to the reading that I had with Lambeth yesterday. We talked about different things like keynotes of the Seven of Clubs and the Jack of Clubs. And one of them is, and you can help me clarify this a little bit, Lambeth, is around the idea of like knowing a lot, but being able to express that to people that want to hear it, when they want to hear it, how they want to hear it, like in a way that it can actually help and bridge that relationship. And so we did talk around that. So I was like, okay, yes, Jessica, you've got a lot of intuition and book knowledge, like both of those. And also not everybody wants to hear that all the time. And this is my expression, because Lambeth is very loving and kind and gentle when you talk through this. And this is where we have that difference in, we both are Seven of Clubs, but I'm just very direct. So, my take home was like, okay, yeah, that's totally right. Like and that's what I told her. I said, you're spot on with this. Like, because I will have the awareness, but I'm also very blunt. And that does, like, I'm noticing how it affects relationships and, even pulling back a little bit so that I can figure out how best to, say these things. And then is it even, does the person even want to hear it? Because if they're, not ready or they don't want to, like it's their life path, they don't need to have the wisdom of Jessica, then I need to respect that. So there was clarification around that, like how to bridge some of those things. And then also affirmations. Like she actually had affirmations where it's like, these are some affirmations that can be said. And I was like, oh my goodness. So not only did the conversation with her help around the rough edges of how I show up in the world and also like who I am as a person, but also these affirmations that just like, it's not just like some simple affirmation to say, But in it was like, oh, like, yes, I humbly speak my truth to those who want to hear. And it was just like, oh, so it's like guidance, like on how to do this. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, that's exactly it. Like, how can I share what I want to share to the world to those who want to hear it? That's the question. And then the affirmation just answered all of that. And it was like, oh, like I could feel like a part of me just kind of like sit back and relax and be like, there is a way to do this. Like, thank you. So I can fulfill my purpose in the world in a way that is accepted. So that was very, very, very helpful to have that information. Because for me, I've been very aware of who I am, and I've been very aware of how I'm accepted. And it's that bridging, because it's like, well, I want to be able to share what I've come to share, and I want people who are willing and able to do that. Like, I want to be able to bridge that, and I just don't have the tools, the skills, the exact, like, very, because that's the other thing. I'm very tell me each step. Like, what is it that I need to do exactly? And then I will work on that. So that was really helpful in the conversation with Lambeth and with the affirmations to help move me towards, fulfilling some of those areas that I'm still having problems with.
I'm so glad that was helpful. I mean, that has been a big part of my path and my healing as well. So we mentioned we both have the 7 of clubs as birth card. You're Aries, I'm Cancer. So I do have a little bit, I'm water, you're fire. So there is going to be a difference in how, in our energy and how we deliver. Also have my second card is a 9 of hearts, and the high side of that card is compassion, universal love and compassion, and very empathetic. The lower side is being way over empathetic and not having any sort of needs for yourself, always leaning towards others. But I do have that like softer, compassionate, nurturing tone. However, I was still also interjecting myself in people's lives and had that know-it-all energy, because I kind of I know a lot. And through learning this card system, and then particularly through the last like 4 or 5 years just on my journey, it's like, okay, I can know things, but I don't have to tell people what I know necessarily unless they ask me. If they ask me, fantastic. Like, here we go. Or I can ask somebody for consent, like, hey, would you like my 2 cents? And all of it, for me, what feels the most important thing and what I love helping others and, wish for others to have as much as possible is harmony and balance in their relationships, in their lives, with themselves, and then in their relationships. I feel like that just makes our life a whole lot more easeful and enjoyable and easier to get through the hard times. And so when I talk about that harmony, we can connect with someone or we can disconnect with them. We can have the intimacy, like where we lean towards each other in a conversation. This could be a friend, this could be someone at a gas station, this could be a coworker, a family member, or we kind of like repel, like oil and water, like repel from each other, which is not intimate. And so when we are, well, Jessica in particular, you've had people reflect back to you, hey, you're this way, or like, stop, or whatever, like eye rolls. Or even if they don't do that, you feel that there's a disconnect there, but you don't really know necessarily what to do with it. Your intention isn't ill. You have a pure intention. You could really help this person with this thing. So I think yesterday, I'm glad that it really helped. Naming it really helps. Just being seen in that there's nothing wrong or bad about more of our shadow side and the lower vibration of our humanness. It's there. It's something that I'm learning, and I really want people to learn to embrace and love for themselves. And once we name it, then we know what we can do, or figure out what we can do about it to not live in that lower side. And so being able to offer the knowledge that you know to someone in a way in which they can receive it and they don't feel like they're being told, what to do, or will actually create closeness and intimacy in those connections, which it just feels really good. Goals. #goals.
I also love like how you were sharing about, there's always the high expression of an energy and then the lower expression of an energy. It's like we have to have the spectrum of, the entire range, because you don't appreciate, like, sometimes we have to go to the dark side, so to speak, to understand the opposite of that. So I think that's also important, that, to not beat ourselves up that we are experiencing, or maybe expressing some of those lower shadow aspects, because it actually helps us to embody the opposite side of that. And I love, right, that insights come when they're supposed to, right? Like Jessica is ready to kind of look at those things in a deeper level, and then the universe brings along Lambeth to help her to like shed that light and the awareness on it. So thank you, universe, for
Yeah, thank you, universe. And this is fun. So the way that I guess Lambeth came to Jessica is how Robin came to Lambeth, which, oh wow, this is deep. So last spring, I was realizing that I really needed help with my business. And it started with me asking my mom if she would help me, which was a pattern breaker. I have rarely in my life ever allowed myself to ask her for help. That's a whole nother podcast. And so I was going through this shift, and was asking her for help. That felt really good. Weeks down the road, month down the road or so, she says, so it's like, well, maybe I hire someone, or, get some outside help with organizing and structure in my business. And I was hemming and hawing about it, as I often do. I'm like, I don't know, da, 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 da. And she said, make a post today in your group, your Facebook group that you're in with these other women, and ask them for referrals and for someone who can help you. And so she actually told me to do something, and I humbly received that, which also is a pattern breaker, because I had started Now I Can Receive. I'm 47 years old, and pretty much, I don't know what I was like as a small child, but pretty much my whole life I've resisted anything that she's told me to do. But she told me to, and I did it. And Robin answered, and we met. And so that feels really divine, that it took whatever it took me to get to where I am, to be able to receive from my mom. And it took courage from my mom to say the thing. Actually, she's never really said it in the way she did that day. She had a whole download of like all this really inspirational stuff. And that's always been me saying all those things. But it was like, as I've softened and not been the know-it-all and the spiritual knowledge guru to her, it gave her space to know things too, and to help support me. And we're still figuring that out for us right now. And it feels really good. It's not always smooth, but that's kind of how it started, which is cool.
Yeah, which I just want to share something briefly about that, because I'm a projector in human design. So that was like such a journey for me, because for a time period it was like, oh, I'm a projector, I have to wait for the invitation, like I can't initiate anything. So it was like such a learning curve for me to be like, oh, I can also get the internal invitation from spirit or from my own intuition to reach out, if I see something and it feels in alignment. So I feel like there's somebody who's listening to this that needs to hear that. And that's also, even if you're not a projector, if you're used to kind of sitting back and like waiting, if you have the opposite energy where you're used to waiting to do something until somebody tells you or suggests, you can also have that same internal knowing through your internal guidance, your intuition, or through your connection with spirit. And whatever that looks like, right? Like I call it prayer, but really it's kind of tuning in with, my angels and my guides. And I think, right, the universe kind of aligns people in places and situations that we never would have realized if we hadn't listened to that guidance. I've actually, yeah, I've had that quite a bit over the past year, like just learning, okay, like I don't, doesn't actually have to be this in this huge invitation. Like it can also be this internal invitation that I feel.
Well, it's interesting you say that because for me, that feeds back into what we were talking about earlier about the Venus and the love connection. I feel like we have more connection, like the veil is much thinner than it ever was before. So we can get those messages and that information so much easier than we were in the past. And I also feel people trusting themselves to listen to that more. And I know that I have been trusting myself to listen to myself more about what to do, how to do, when to do, who to do it with, and then really tapping in and not being so busy, but doing the best next step. And all of that kind of feeds into, you know, who is that person that's going to give me that information? It could be my mom. It could be somebody I haven't spoken to in a really long time. But if I put that call out, like, I need help, help me with this, help provide me guidance, then the universe conspires to help me in whatever way. And I also say, sometimes I'm like, I need it a little bit louder because maybe there was somebody that's been trying to tell me this and I haven't been listening. And so, okay, let me open more so I can really hear that wisdom that wants to come through them. And that's where that humility, like the humility is such an amazing piece of that. And I love that you said it because it resonated deeply. Because when we do know a lot of things, it is difficult to hear answers outside of us. And I have been working so much on being more humble. And as I see my husband growing in his own spirituality, like he will say some amazing stuff. And I just have to stop and listen long enough and accept it because it can come from anywhere. It can come from a child, it can come from our partner, it can come from somebody we've known a really long time. And if we're not humble enough and open enough to hear it, then it's like, okay, well, we're answering what you're asking for. You just have to be open to hear it. So that's such a huge piece of being willing to hear the message no matter where it comes from.
Yeah, that was a very humbling experience for me. Like when I first started my spiritual journey, because I used to be a hardcore know-it-all. Like I was such a know-it-all. And there was somebody who wasn't spiritual at all in my life. And I remember like this happened a few times in the span of like a few months. I had these random people that weren't spiritual, that weren't like, that I thought weren't connected at all. And they dropped like these truth bombs. And I was like, holy crap. Like it's very humbling when you have that happen. It's like, oh crap. The universe is always conspiring to bring us these insights and these teachings for sure. But I love, Lambeth, that you were able to kind of break that pattern with your mom too, because I feel like there's such like just your connection with like the mother healing and what you've been able to overcome and like what you've shared with me. That's it feels like that's also like very important in your journey and like your expression through cardology and like what you do. Do you want to share anything about that or anything more, I should say?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually haven't been thinking much about that particular thing that you're talking about, that we've talked a lot about in a while. And I do want to say something about it. So what Robin is speaking to is my journey, my motherhood journey has been very challenging and quite unconventional, which has been, I went through a lot of beating myself up around that and, kind of not accepting that. And I'm stepping into like, this is authentic. This is real. And, so then like, how can we access the highest expression of this authenticity? And so through that journey of mine and discovery, I've been able to help other mothers that I read for, hold that space for them, others who are similar to I am, but to how it's been for me, where it's been really hard and there's a lot of things that aren't working and they're becoming sick and depressed. And so have really been able to help workshop those things and hold that space and offer validation and affirmation and growth from there. Part of it is being able to do parent-child readings. I have had two fathers that I've worked with, so but it's mostly mothers. And so what I'll do is I'm able to read the cards of the child. And then I'm also able to read the connections between the mother and the child, or the connections between the siblings, if there are any, the father and the child, the mother and the father, just to kind of like look at how is this family flowing. And almost every time there's some sort of like, oh my gosh, like, just again, it's the validation, the affirmation, it's being seen in that and bringing the awareness to it, because from there then we can do something about it. And it's really beautiful to be able to speak for a child in a way. It's like somebody getting their astrology chart read for the child. That's very common. And so similar in this system, getting their spread read and getting their cards read, and really help so for me, my specific example was when I first had a reading from myself and my oldest son. One of the connections that we have is a moon connection. And a moon connection is really beautiful and wonderful. I am moon to him. I nurture and love and support and follow him. It's more of like a feminine energy. And the sun connection is more of the protector, provider, caretaker, leader energy. But he was 3 years old and 5 years old and 7 years old. And we would butt heads, and I'm just like, I can't make him do anything. And I just I felt so much defeat. Like I just wanted to be able to connect with him and meet him where he was, or like have somehow just have coherence and harmony in our relationship, and have some parent a little bit more easily. And I had this reading, and the reader said, you can't make him do anything. You can't lead him. Which I know is hard because you're the parent. And I was a single mom at the time. So he was living with me almost full time. But the reader said, you basically can't father him, but you can mother him and nurture him really well. Like he's really blessed to have his mother also be the nurturer in the moon energy. And so it was just amazing. I cried, and I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm not crazy. This just is what it is. I'm going to work with this. And so I was able to find a way to not let him be in charge necessarily, because I was still the parent, but to let him be in charge of what he could be in charge of, and to let him provide and protect for me in the little ways that he wanted to, instead of like being like, no, that's not your job, stay a child. But like he really, kind of felt called to care for me in a way. And now he's 12. And the last few years have been, as he's gotten older and he doesn't need me to tell him to put his shoes on and things like that. It's so beautiful. And I really do get to support and nurture him. And I'm not trying to, tell him what to do with his life. I know that I can't really do that. Even if I tell him what elective he should choose at school, or what sport he should play or whatever, like I just don't do that. And so I'm able to really help mothers at least reduce that kind of stress, to bring some more ease and flow into the family.
Well, okay, like look at that from a bigger perspective too, like how amazing that is, right? Because our generation, like, and I'm not knocking our parents at all, like they did the best that they could, right? Um, think about how much different this new generation is going to be expressing themselves and coming into themselves and their own energy. Like if their parents understand them on this deeper level of, oh, okay, like this is how their energy moves. This is how my connection with them is expressed. Like being able to be that next expression of parenthood or of motherhood or fatherhood or whatever that looks like, it's only going to continue to help our evolution, our collective evolution. So I love that. I don't know. I just love that. I think it's so beautiful. And like you said, right, children a lot of times can't express what their needs are. Like, parents are giving them what they think they need, but you can't ask a 2-year-old like, hey, what are your emotional needs? Like,
Right.
So bravo. Thank you for offering that, Lambeth.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's really, it's such an honor, and it feels really like kind of redemptive for me. For instance, if someone had read my chart, my astrology chart, or my cardology to my parents, if they had had that read, or numerology, they would have learned that I'm very sensitive, very empathic, and non-conforming, and kind of, need things to be a little bit different and maybe not the mainstream expectation. And so if they were interested in nurturing that in me, that would have been nurtured in me, and my life would have been different. I used to kind of feel resentful of that and like, oh, I wish, and why couldn't they? But therapy and my spiritual growth has really helped that, to the point now where I'm able to help others in this way, not wishing that my experience was any different. Like, it is what it is. I fully accept it. And from there, I'm really able to help these parents and these children. And oftentimes, oh, it's so healing. So an example for me, I mentioned I have a 9 of hearts as my second card. I'm the only heart card of my parents, my grandparents on both sides, my co-parent who I married, my ex-husband, and our 2 children. So out of all the closest people in my family of origin and my chosen family, I'm the only heart card. So when I learned that, I was like, no wonder everybody tells me I'm too sensitive and like emotional, and like they can't, if they didn't tell me they couldn't handle, it was like kind of expressed or modeled that I couldn't really show up fully expressed. And so I see that often. It could be, I have a dear friend who she's also the only heart card, but all of her other family of origin, they're all clubs. So they all talk a lot more than she might talk. Clubs are communication. And so it's fun to see those patterns, and it's also really healing. Oftentimes, there'll be like a really, like an 8 or a king or a queen energy, because we're using the 52 card deck of cards. And so a king or a queen card that someone has, it's a very powerful leader energy, but they're in a family where that's suppressed and squashed, and like they can't be in charge or lead anything. And so that's not cultivated and fostered. And then we get into our adult lives, and, we try to do the best we can. It's the same with therapy. It's like, the therapy is normalized now. It's even trendy. And so, yeah, we're able to help heal the past generations by healing ourselves, and then the future as well. Yeah. And these kids that are being born now, they require it. I feel like, I don't know if y'all have heard anything like that on podcasts or in your own circles or in your own downloads, but it's come up a lot in the last few years, especially the children that are like maybe 8 and younger now. They're like, yeah, like, you have to let me be who I am. And it's like, we need that in our collective evolution. We need something new.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I do galactic astrology readings, and I've run into a lot of mostly women, not all, but mostly women in their 60s and 70s, and they are caretaking children, whether they're their own children, their if they're related to them or not. But they're like, when I look in their galactic astrology, like, they came here to help the children of right now, to provide that bridge, to help with the nervous system, to provide that nurturing. And it's so, like, it's mind-blowing in a way that, like, you look at kind of their soul history, and all along they've been shepherding humanity, but they are here right now for those children in specific. Like, at least 50% of the readings I do are here for the children of right now. And they don't realize it, because they're like, well, I'm helping with kids. Like, no, like, that's huge. Like, the people that are out there taking care of children, whether you're related to them or not, daily, weekly interactions, it really is helping. Because, especially, I find it fascinating, people that are 60 and 70, they've been through lots of changes. They have that cellular memory, and they're able to bridge that with the really brand new beings that may never have been born on the earth before. So they're able to provide that information, that energetic information, that DNA information, that frequency that really helps ground them. It's very much a passing of a baton, and it's very important work. So I see that, and that's where I say, like, yes, the children right now are super special, and the people that are here to help them as they grow up in this environment are very, very special too.
That's amazing. Yeah, thanks for that validation.
Love that we just flow. Like we kind of always have a general game plan, but I appreciate the things that come up and that, you know, that we're driven to chat about. And Jessica set a beautiful intention before we started that you guys hear whatever it was that you needed here and like whatever it was that we needed to kind of chat through. So thank you, Lambeth, for coming on. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your beautiful energy and all of your wisdom. You can find Lambeth. Where can we find you? Where can they find you, Lambeth?
On Instagram, Lambeth Long. Yeah, on Instagram. And I have a scheduling page through Acuity. Maybe we can put it, I assume you have show notes or something. And I have a couple different offerings, like a basic reading, and then I have packages where we're able to go a lot more in depth of your own cards and your relationships with others, business, health. I'm able to also support through energetic readings, which we haven't even talked about today, and healings to unblock as needed. And so being able to do multiple sessions over a few months is really, really powerful.
Yeah, so definitely go check out Lambeth. I'm so thankful that y'all got to connect and that we got to chat. I haven't seen you in a minute. So thank you for coming on. Thank you guys for listening. Leave us some nice comments below, you know, share with your friends, tell everybody about what we got going on over here. Yeah, thank you. Anything else y'all want to say as we close?
No, just so thankful and grateful for your wisdom and knowledge, Lambeth. I'm so happy that we can share you with our audience and all the gifts that you bring, and definitely get a reading from her. Like one of the most profound readings I've had. I don't get a lot of readings, so I'll just throw that out there. I do get some, but literally like blew the top of my head off, like with amazing information. So definitely, please reach out to her. I know it was mind blowing. Like, oh my goodness, I loved it.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate y'all creating such a beautiful container to have this conversation. And yeah, just happy to be on the journey together.
All right. Bye.
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 I can see the stars align, dance around the moon every night. And now my eyes are open wide, and the sky has never looked so bright. Now I don't need to see the road to believe